So, the phenomenon where a word loses meaning because you repeat it too often is apparently called semantic saturation. I could have gone my whole life without knowing that, but I googled it in an attempt to salvage any comedy this intro could have had, given that I repeated the word dungeon to myself for about 14 minutes trying to come up with a pun. A pungeon. Enter the Gungeon is a bullet hell roguelike, and if you have any experience in this genre of game, you know that they tend to straddle the line between challenging and aggravating quite often. What makes these worth picking up in the first place is their near infinite replay value. Each playthrough is procedurally generated, so you're never looking at the same layout twice. The elements that make up the gameplay, however, stay consistent, so you begin to familiarize yourself with the environments and enemies and items while still feeling like each encounter is fresh. This makes learning slow, as when you die it's back to square one, which then branches out into a whole bunch of different squares because you're now facing a whole new level. At first, chances are you won't be able to reach the first boss of the first floor, let alone beat him. But after a few failures, you'll understand that you, in fact, do not have to dodge roll through Gatling Gull's randomized spray attack. You take your pick of one of 4 starting characters, of which you can choose Han So-So, Orange is the New Trash, free items, or Jesus. Each character caters to a different playstyle, except Convict. I don't even have a joke here, she's just terrible. Now, the design of all the playable characters in this game is really nice, but the NPC design is what really shines. Almost every single enemy has an intense sense of personality. The bosses more so than the others, and even then, each floor is crawling with creativity. Shotgun shells armed with shotguns, Mace Windu, Gat Bats, Pinhead. And all of those are just level 1 enemies. Each floor adds new variants, making previously introduced baddies stronger, and brings new targets into the mix. The challenge is constant, never giving you a moment to rest from the barrage. Luckily for the player, the arsenal available to you is tenfold that of the enemy variety. It's not exactly reaching Borderlands level of diversity, and that's a good thing. But there's far more than enough to satisfy even the nuttiest of gun nuts. I'm not rewriting that. From AKs to laser rays to crossbows to a cash register that shoots your money, it gives the impression that if an idea was had, it was developed. And let's not forget that you can add even more firearms to the pool of possibilities should you purchase them with a special currency dropped by bosses. And despite the amount of guns here, the weapon design presented in this game is phenomenal. Every singular weapon has a new utility to offer you. It might be something as simple as an M1 Garand, which offers you more range than your starting pistol, or something as ludicrous as the Siren, which is a shotgun that fires fish. My personal favorite is probably the AK-47, which destroys enemies and locks, making it both a useful tool and firearm. This brings me to what is one of my favorite pieces of this game, the conceptual art style. Gungeon is a story about guns, filled with guns, for the love of guns. The enemies are bullets who shoot bullets, your health is bullets, your keys are bullets, everything is bullets. There is a gun, which is a shell, which fires shotguns, which in turn shoots their own bullets.
What does it mean?
I don't know, to me there's just something genius about making a game that is 100% guns and then having it not be a first-person shooter. It almost feels like a bait and switch because there's more polish on this game than there is in most AAA titles. And while I realize that it is a much greater undertaking to put details into the likes of a Battlefield game, there are these minute instances that simply do not happen in games anymore. Prime example, if you reload the big shotgun near a shotgun kin, they are loaded into the gun to be used as ammunition. This only occurs with this one weapon, and its existence is nearly useless, because it's highly unlikely that a player is going to attempt to reload next to a shotgun-wielding enemy while playing seriously, but the developers made it possible anyway. So when another player finds out this is possible, they share it, and then you yourself want to see if it can happen. This is something that I never see happen in games anymore, these tiny, practically insignificant characteristics that hardly affect the gameplay, but make you smirk when you find it out. It's not an occurrence that you have to go out of your way to encounter, it just happens. And you go, wait, did that just... I love it. I love it, and I don't see it happen anymore. Of course, a fantastic art style and design is just that without gameplay. Now, Gungeon takes influence from a lot of other games, but there's one really obvious source of inspiration that I feel I need to address. Dark Souls, because of the dodge rolling and mimics. That's it. That's all I'm telling you. The Binding of Isaac is a game I hold very near and dear to my heart, as it was the first game that introduced me to roguelikes. It's a great game, but it's not without its flaws, and I'm referring to Rebirth as the original has aged like a piece of dog shit. It's covered in flies and all the grass around it is dead. The games are still very similar in their core gameplay. You start out with a small set of equipment and work your way through arena-like rooms, gaining upgrades each floor after beating a boss. Also both bullet hellish. Also keys are valuable. Also, where Rebirth stumbles is in its progression of each playthrough. You start very slow and weak, and often nearing the end of your run, you're able to enter a room and clear it in seconds. This makes restarting feel like a slog, and makes me not want to play it anymore. Gungeon avoids this very strategically by never letting you reach the point of being overpowered. Sure, there might be a scenario where you can pull a crazy play using a specific gun, but you will never be in a situation where you're going room to room clearing everything with one shot. Having more than 4 directions to shoot in also helps ensure that skill is required to hit your target. One of my favorite features is the teleport. If you've cleared a room, you can teleport to return to it so as to avoid trudging across the map just to open one chest that gives you Casey. The dodge roll is a simple but essential addition to the traditional bullet hell formula, giving you the split-second invincibility you need so desperately. And while dodging is not a new concept to the genre, I think the implementation here is better than most, as it feels a lot of enemies' attack patterns are built around your abilities, pushing you to your limits to keep you moving constantly. It feels as though every step possible was taken towards minimizing downtime to keep the action high. There's no exploiting the bullet waves so that you can just sit in a corner and camp. You have to be moving constantly, and in a sense, it feels like Gungeon carries the gameplay of a classic first-person shooter down to the second dimension. Constant strafing and hip firing to avoid waves of enemy fire in large arenas that you can't leave until you're finished killing everyone and everything that budges within it. Okay, maybe it's a bit of a stretch. Regardless, I don't think there's any denying that Enter the Gungeon has perfected the roguelike. There is never ever a dull moment, and this is coming from someone who really sucks at the game. On my average run, I can't make it past 4-3, but I still get a sense of growth from each and every playthrough. This $15 game will yield more playtime than rivals at twice or even 4 times the asking price. I genuinely don't have anything bad to say about this game. Even the music, which is probably the weakest element at play, isn't bad. It's reminiscent of the music in a Smash Bros title in the sense that the developers knew you'd be hearing the music over and over again, so they tried to make it as replayable as possible. To me, this is what mastery looks like. The amazing people over at Dodge Roll have a grasp on game design that most developers could only aspire to attain. It's not particularly groundbreaking, but rather perfection of a base laid before it. This is the best bullet hell I've ever played. The best roguelike I've ever played. And potentially the best top-down shooter I've ever played, save for maybe Hotline Miami. This game is a 10.